This is Phantology.
You may have heard of us.
All right, what's up, followers of Shaik and the Whirlwind Goddess? This is your host from Phantology, Stephen, along with my lifelong friends, Jake and Ryan. Guys, are we ready to do House of Chains by Stephen Erickson today? I am a little bit nervous about this one. We will see how this goes.
I was ready probably about 2 years ago, and as time has gone on, my readiness has waned a little bit as I've read other fantasy books. And
so a little passive aggressive frustration with us for taking so long to read it, Ryan.
Not really, honestly. I mean, it takes a lot of energy, I feel like, to get through these books.
Yeah, I was ready about 2 months ago. Same thing. Now I'm halfway through Midnight Tides. So
wait, so you finished Bone Hunters? Or wait, no, Midnight Tides is book 5 and then Bone Hunters.
I hope so.
Yeah,
So,
I think so.
Yeah, not that it would really matter, honestly, right, with a lot of Malazan. Yeah, so I'm trying to remember back to House of Chains and detangle knowledge that comes from Midnight Tides, although there's not a lot of overlap, so it shouldn't be too hard.
And Ryan, you've read all of them, but like you say, this was some time ago. I just finished House of Chains about a month ago, and since then I read Brian McClellan's new book, so I just have one book to separate, and it's not a Malazan book, so theoretically I should have the freshest memory, but I guess we'll see how much I even understood the first time.
Let's get to it.
Yeah, well, wish us luck. All right, so before we try to talk about specific plot elements and characters and all that, what were your general impressions of the fourth book?
Karsa Orlong is overpowered.
Karsa, yeah, especially when you realize when he's talking about slaying children, he just means humans, like human adults, and you're like, oh, you are huge. You are very overpowered.
I think the timeline was a little confusing at first because most the events of the book take place, I think, before, or at least the beginning of this book takes place before the first 3 books in Malazan. Definitely
before Dead House Gates, which was kind of confusing because this book is essentially the sequel to Dead House Gates. And so as they start to like retrace the same places and steps, it was kind of hard to know at what point they were coming into that.
Mm-hmm. So yes. I actually heard that this one Stephen Erickson was writing this book after Dead House Gates, and something happened to the manuscript, or am I getting this confused with Memories of Ice?
I definitely heard this story. I don't know what book it was, but yeah.
So there was one book that Stephen Erickson was working on, and then like something happened to his manuscript and he lost like so much progress. I think he just got like so frustrated and decided to just work on the next book.
Yeah, he essentially had to rewrite the whole book.
Wow, I have not heard that story. That'd be fun to ask you about that sometime, although probably not a story he likes telling. I wonder if, I mean, I guess it would make sense at the beginning of this one because the beginning starts a little bit different than what we've seen from the first 3 books. So that could make some sense if he had a start and then he scrapped it and he wrote this start instead.
Maybe. Speaking of the start, it's interesting. I loved Memories of Ice so much. It just felt like the whole book, there was this sense of urgency and like build the whole time. Whereas the pacing here is very different. But I would say probably the hardest part of reading Memories of Ice and the other Malazan books before it is there's so many characters and point of view changes that you're like barely keeping up with what's happening in the present, let alone like what's going to happen. Whereas starting, I don't know if it's all of book 1, but like a large portion, maybe like 15 to 20% of the beginning of the book is all through one point of view, like one continuous chronological point of view, which was really helpful to get going. And it's kind of disappointed I didn't get to see a lot of people from Memories of Ice when I first started, but Karsa's plotline was compelling enough and engaging enough with that continuous narrative that it was a really good start.
Yeah, it's all the first book within the book is all of that continuous narrative. And I was also confused. I didn't even know where we were for a while. I mean, you can refer to the map and realize, okay, we're here on northern Genebacus, which we haven't seen yet. And the only real touch points through the first book are like, okay, there's this reference to Akariam, who we've seen before, and the Solanda ship, and then finally when they get over to the Seven Cities, it's like you kind of settle in to the story a bit more. And then it's nice because once Karsa's story, once the beginning half of his story finishes, then you realize we've actually seen this guy before in Dead House Gates, because he was Toblaki, and then that's how he's introduced throughout the remainder of the book. So I think the thing for me with House of Chains is the criticism that I feel like this is valid criticism. It's a personal criticism that I have, is I feel like the story, the plot lines are like so separate. Because Jake, like you say in Memory of Ice, there are a lot of separate plot lines and storylines, and it's hard to keep everyone straight. But that sense of like we're all kind of working towards the same goal really helps you, even though there's so many different characters and everyone's got different motives, and it's all kind of secretive, and what, that's your typical Malazan story that we've seen so far. The thing that I struggle with in House of Chains is, at least on the surface level, the stories are really disconnected. People are scattered really just across the entire world that we've seen so far, and it doesn't seem that there are too many connections between them unless you have a deeper understanding, which I don't really, but like reading some things online helps with that. Like it helps me appreciate it a bit more. So I think that's a valid criticism of like, this thing is so separated and it's just hard to follow. And really for that reason, through most of my read, I was like, this is not my favorite book. And I think I liked the first three Malazan books better than this one.
So I feel like I've read books that are structured similarly, where you have plot lines that seem, very different, but then in the end they come together. I can't think of any off the top of my head, though.
I think you're thinking of Seinfeld. You have the A plot. And
I'm definitely not thinking of Seinfeld.
And the C plot, and then somehow they all interconnect at the end.
Yeah, it's how most Seinfeld episodes go. The marine biologist one is the best.
Oh yeah,
that I can. Yeah,
is that a titleist? Yeah, I don't know. I think it's hard. I think the beginning of this book was really compelling, and then I liked the ending, and the middle part was just kind of like, it did expand a lot and it kind of slowed down a bit. Certain aspects of it I really liked. I liked learning more about like Hiboric and Lorik, if I'm saying the name right. Both of their plots were cool. Bidithal was a very good villain. And I liked seeing how the crippled god played into this. It was cool after reading Memories of Ice and realizing, okay, the crippled god is this huge deal, and it continuing on into the next book. Whereas you didn't really get to see that with previous Malazan books. Like, I don't even know.
As far as an understanding of what the ultimate big bad, because at this point in the series, we feel like the crippled god is going to be
or even an antagonist that is like similar book to book, so that was cool. I think a little bit too much time was spent on like just the armies waiting, like Tavora's army just kind of sitting there with strings. Like there's some cool parts there, and I liked how Tavora's old guard, she made the fist, like his
Yeah, I think
internal
it's
struggle,
Gamut. Yeah.
like realizing like he's not trained for this, and not doesn't feel capable. But I feel like that kind of dragged on a bit, and then the Crocus and Absalar plot line, I kind of feel like that plot line was just like it could go in any book. It was so separate, like
yeah.
Which I mean they like the Tisti Edor, however you say that, like they play a part there, and they're a bigger part in Midnight Tides, so I appreciate that more now.
Okay,
but
so that's kind of an introduction for you, at least.
Yeah, them and the introduction of Troll Singar, that kind of stuff, like at the time was like, what's going on? Although the Troll storyline, you get to know on rack, which then connects at the end.
And you spend more time with them. Crocus and Absalar, or I guess Cutter and Absalar. Yeah. There's not a whole lot of time spent there, but there seems like a lot happens that's like so separate than everything else. And then, like you say, really, what did they? Yeah, what exactly was the significance in this book?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I don't think themselves were insignificant. I really liked the developing dynamic between them. How Cutter's like, oh, this is who Absalar is, so I need to become like her because I love her. I'm going to be an assassin. She'll respect me. And Absalar is like, this is the part about me that I hate, and you're like committing to this. Like I thought that was good tension. But yeah.
So it's interesting because having read Midnight Tides and further, like all of these parts that you guys are talking about, like I recognize how it's more important to the story as a whole. I mean, that doesn't necessarily like excuse it for if a reader feels like it's out of place. But I mean, it's an interesting book because I feel like the Karsa Orlong Shaikh whirlwind storyline is kind of carried over from Dead House Gates, and so you're finishing up there, as well as like you're developing Tavora's character and like the character of her army, who it'll be more important to see later on, as well as like Absalar and Cutter. They're also important in future books, and that doesn't necessarily mean like it was done in the best way. I mean, I do agree with you in a lot of these, a lot of the like military fiction, like the nitty gritty, and like these like just squads, they kind of blend together. I think that Erickson creates a lot of these characters who in the military, like their names just start to go together in your head, and it's really hard to keep them,
especially when characters get two names as the series
like Strings and Fiddler
and Crocus and Cutter.
And so it does, for me. I agree that those parts are a little bit like harder to get through, but I do think that is part of the appeal for some people. Like I've seen these categorized as like military fiction, and so I'm sure there are readers who love like the structure of the military, and you have your privates and your corporals taking orders from the sergeant, and then you have like the people over them, like up to the fist. And so I mean, I definitely think that is appealing to some people, although it might not be as appealing to me.
And I think definitely Cutter and Absalar deserve to be in this book, based on it just being a sequel to Dead House Gates, right? But just plot wise, they were probably the most disconnected, and they came at a point where, I mean, I don't really remember exactly when they came in, but it seemed like the book started to slow down, and then we're switching to them, and then I never felt like it paid off in this book, like why we're switching to them. It was cool to see Cotillion more on screen and get a feel for his character. It's interesting. I don't know if just Erickson is deciding to change people a bit as the series matures, But Shadowthrone, his instances on screen have seemed so chaotic up until this book, like so chaotic and like kind of like Mad Mage vibes. Whereas Cotillion seems much more grounded in this book than I'm trying to remember what we really saw of him like personality wise in the earlier books.
I feel like he was more of a killer, like a cold-blooded killer in earlier books, especially when he's like possessed Absalar and is, you know, she's just like, you know, killing people left and right, and everybody's afraid of her and in the Bridge Burners because, you know, she's not like whatever a 16-year-old girl's supposed to be. It's more like this cold-blooded killer. But as you like get to know Cotillion a bit more, you're right, I think he does seem a bit more grounded and not quite as cold-blooded, maybe a bit warmer.
Well, with that, and also he seemed just like I'm thinking of that first scene in Gardens of the Moon where Cotillion and Shadowthrone like show up right before they possess Absalar. They just seem kind of like mischievous, conniving like forces. Maybe that's just how I took it. And then Cotillion in this one just does not give off that vibe. And I don't know, it was cool to see. I felt like I got to know him as a character a lot better this time around, which is fun.
I mean, could it be just now you have more understanding of who the characters actually are?
Could be that. It could also be a new narrator, right?
Yeah.
Which listening to the books, that was kind of jarring at first.
Yeah,
I just gotta say, I cannot believe you guys remember as much as you do from listening, because I've tried listening. I cannot keep things straight, and so I'm reading through these, and I'm still struggling with so many of the details.
I generally listen to books at like 1.7 speed. For these, I'm like at 1.25 to 1.4. Like I have to be a lot slower, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a big difference. And I re-listen to chapters all the time, like because I'm usually listening while I'm commuting or like doing work around the house, and I'll realize like okay, I need to go back like 20 minutes. I don't know what's going on anymore. So maybe that's why it's the repetition. Like subconsciously I've heard it and then I have to listen to it again actively, and it helps a bit. I don't know. But
okay, so the Crocus Absalar, the Cutter Absalar thing, we kind of agree was maybe a little out of place, not as important. One thing that I struggled with for most of the book until the end was the whole Troll Singar and Onrak, the Tlon-Imas plotline. And up until the end, at the end, it finally kicked. It's like, okay, you know, this is why this is significant. But as they were trudging along through the different warrens and meeting up with the Tiste, what were they? The Laosian, right?
oh
yeah, having those little conflicts. I was like, who are these guys? What are they? I just kind of struggled to place them as much. By the end, okay, I get it, but they were the slog for me. They were probably the part that I least enjoyed about this book, at least.
they had some fun moments, and then it was just a lot like, okay, new characters. Were they the ones who, once they escaped from where they were, they cross paths with Karsa after he forges his sword?
Well, they don't see him, right? Like he leaves and then they come in right afterwards.
Yeah. I thought that was fun. Like those little moments.
Yeah.
Or
when Karsa runs into Kariam and Napo for a second, that was fun.
Yeah, I loved you kind of touched on this earlier, but I loved the little nods to the stories that we've heard before in the beginning, like with Ikariam and Tlon-Imas, and and just like they like, it helps expand and build the world while giving you some familiar stuff. This one is totally unfamiliar, and it seemed, I just remembered it right now because it didn't really follow up to it, but the Forkril Assail, is that her name?
The one that they free?
Yeah.
Or that Karsa frees at the beginning?
Yeah, and then she like maims one of his companions.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was cool. Just like, oh, there's this like ancient creature that's trapped, and like that just, I don't know. Karsa himself alone is such a cool character, and it's another moment of Malazan where I'm like, Steven Erickson makes me want to become a better D&D player. I create cooler characters because they're so cool. And that comboed with, oh, we just found this like ancient creature pinned at the bottom of this, was it a well or a cave? I don't know.
It was just under like a huge rock.
Yeah.
But wasn't it like down? I don't remember. Anyways, that just seemed like such a D&D moment. Like, roll a perception check. Okay, you see this person pinned.
So
what are you gonna do?
you know who Karsa kind of reminds me of? And maybe you guys will agree or disagree. But he kind of reminds me of like Jorg of Ancraft, because he's relatively
What series is that?
Yeah,
He's
Jake doesn't have a chance to agree or disagree because
the Broken Empire by Mark Lawrence.
Mark Lawrence's first trilogy.
Just because Jorg and Karsa both think they know the world so much, and they're really just like children essentially, kind of fumbling their way through it, and they have like some early victories, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm the best, like I've got like the whole world figured out. And then shortly thereafter they find basically they don't really know what they're talking about, and the world is so different from the way that they think it is, and they have some growing to do.
They do. Jorg never loses that arrogance to him.
Karsa definitely starts to a bit. Well,
it's like,
I don't know if he loses the arrogance
through the medium part, through the middle of his story that we've seen thus far. He seems to come to more of an understanding of, these are the larger forces at play, and I am more insignificant. And then towards the end of his story, he's like, actually, I'm pretty awesome.
Well,
yeah.
I don't think the arrogance really goes away. I think he just realizes, well, like, I think his arrogance is based in, I am the coolest person and the best person. And what changes is he thinks he understands the world, and he slowly starts to realize, okay, I don't know everything. He's able to take advice from his friends, his like frenemy who accompanies them a little better, but he still thinks he's the coolest and the best around, like, regardless. Like, he doesn't ever stop to think like, oh, maybe I should, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, he does change some ways. Like, he starts to respect his father more.
And he recognizes that he's not, maybe what he's trying to do isn't what he wants, and maybe he's being manipulated a bit.
Yeah. It's not like growth, like, okay, now I've realized I was wrong, I should change, and now I have a more humble mindset. It's just like, oh, that is not what I want anymore. This is what I want now. It was really cool to see him challenge his gods who had been guiding him the whole time.
Yeah.
And even kill one, right?
Yeah. And then
I do think he genuinely learned to care for others, not just himself. I feel like there was some genuine growth.
Yeah. I think, I agree. I think there's genuine growth. It's just interesting because you'd expect, I feel like he grew more than you think he grew, but also he grew less than you think, because he's still that arrogant, like how the crippled god wants him to become his his knight, or was that going to be the title? I don't know.
Yeah, I think he was supposed to be the knight.
Yeah.
And he's just like, he's like, I'm not going to be your knight. But then I feel like when the book ended, I'm still wondering, like, is he still being his knight? Like, does he?
Yeah.
It seems like he's still playing into that. Like, I don't think the crippled god is like, oh no, he's not doing my bidding. He's like, cool, like more chaos, more suffering. Like, so I don't know. I hear he grows more as the series goes on, but I was really intrigued by how realistic his growth was in this, and that he definitely like learned and changed and grew, but he is still like fundamentally Karsa.
Yeah.
He's adapted, maybe is a better way to say it. Is he's kind of adapted himself to how the world has changed, but he's still fundamentally like very arrogant and a killing machine.
He had some really cool moments of like honor, like where like the slave guy who helps him, the
Torvald Nom.
Yeah, who's like Rallick Nom's probably second cousin or something.
Some relation, some distant type relation. Yeah.
Him, and then who's the guy? I think that was him. I feel like there's another guy. Like there's a couple instances.
At the end, Leoman like frees him from the prison, and they go off into the desert together.
Yeah, Leoman, that was the other one. Yeah, and then it's like he has these moments of honor. Oh, and when they're in the other like broken warren or whatever with all the sharks.
Oh yeah, that was a great part.
Like they were like the shark was attacking someone that he said he would defend or something like that, and so he like brutally murders the shark. So like the guy was already dead. Like the shark had already
I think
eaten
it
him.
was just one of Stilgar. Was that the slave master's? Just like one of his cronies, wasn't it?
It might have been, but it was like the shark had clearly killed the guy, and like I don't know, but he felt like his honor demanded that he then like destroy the shark. Like he had these cool moments of honor, but his honor is so twisted that like Stilgar, like what he does to Stilgar, like he's like, I promised I would like make him suffer, and like Stilgar very much suffers the rest of the book. But
and then I think at the end, doesn't he realize like I probably should have done that? Probably should have just killed him right from the beginning.
I don't know.
I feel like he does come to that realization. Maybe I'm making that up. I thought I remembered that.
He might.
Yeah. I mean, he cuts off his hands, or do you mean after that?
At the very end.
Well, when he kills him, when he finally does actually kill him at the very end.
But was that like, oh, I should have done this, or just like, I had to kill him anyways? Should have just done this sooner, you know?
Yeah,
it's hard to tell.
I guess it could have been either. Yeah, but you're right. His character growth does seem very human. Where like we as humans, when we grow up and realize there's more to the world than just ourselves, and we have to like become more altruistic and look out for others and stuff. It's not like a switch suddenly flips and we're like, oh, now I'm like super benevolent and I don't care about myself ever. And like, I'm going to be this amazing person. It's like, not really. Like you just kind of learn that, okay, I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to try to do it more often, but like, I'm still kind of a selfish person. And I don't know, depending on who you are, you go in different directions, but the way that he grew did seem pretty realistic.
Yeah. Like just the fact that like he butted heads with, I can't remember the name of his buddy, that like, they were interested in the same woman.
It's like Bearloth or
Bearloth. Yeah, it started with the B. I don't remember. But he just seemingly like shot down everything that guy said. But then when there are moments where clearly Bearloth's like philosophy towards the world was like showing to be beneficial, like he was humble enough to be like, oh yeah, you were right. Like this is a good point. But still not saying like I was wrong, but just, oh yes, this is true, you know. like he was still able to remember these things and not just completely like dismiss them and only focus on what he wants, but he wasn't able to like adequately admit his fault all the time.
And when he needed a companion, I didn't read it as Bearloth was still actually influencing, but like more just like I thought it was more just like his memories of him. I don't know. I'm not really sure what was going on there.
Yeah,
but he chose to like incorporate him into take him under advisement in whatever capacity that actually was.
So you could tell he was kind of like in his sword, right?
Yeah, that I thought he like put him in the sword.
And like, but how did he doesn't have the ability to do that, does he?
He was still like, well, Haboric had told him earlier that like he was still surrounded by like the spirits of those he had slain, right? Like in Dead
Yeah.
House Gates.
And so
And
the
he
carving of his stone forest kind of like was a conduit or something.
maybe, and like he talked like before that point, he would talk like you're saying, like were these just memories of his friends like still talking to him? I took it as at that point that they were like not haunting him, but I don't know. Maybe they weren't. Maybe that wasn't their actual like essence, but yeah, he was able to like he had this kind of facade of like I don't listen to anything, but he really did like he was able to recall and recognize like the wisdom of it later on. He had a lot of really cool moments. Yeah, Karsa.
And I mean, that
Witness.
wasn't even his whole, not even his whole story. So he goes,
Yeah.
you mentioned he kills one of his gods, quote unquote, who really were just the
Talani
Talanamas.
Mass, which that was a
Or
cool.
were they actually? Don't remember if it was before or after the ritual. Like, were they just regular Amas or Talan?
No, I think they were Talon, but they were
Oh, right, they were undead because he killed the one, but it was like still alive.
but they were unbounded, right? Yeah, he didn't kill it, but he basically did what Onrak was afraid of, right? Like where you just like you get to a point where you're useless and you have to be like released or whatever.
Right.
But I thought that was a cool world building twist where they like the twist is that there's something you didn't know they were, but what they end up being is something you're familiar with in a different way. That was really well done in my opinion.
Yeah.
And
then he gets his cool horse at the end, and
does he talk to the tree lady or just Ikariam? Do they both?
They both do. I don't remember what was going on with that tree lady.
I don't know. I feel like she's like part of a Nazaf house or something like that. That was
there was that. Yeah,
interpretation of it.
Yeah. There was that, and somehow that I think was related to what the crippled god was trying to do.
Yeah, he wanted the he wanted access to that or something. I don't. It's hard to remember like what is something that was actually written and like explicitly stated to me, and what was. I'm reading this and trying to understand what's going on, and so I'm making these connections that could be right or completely wrong. So I remember thinking that's what it was, but I don't know if that is what I was led to believe or just misunderstood.
I mean, in order to appreciate these books, you have to try to do that. Otherwise, you're going to read through it and you're going to be like, what just happened? Like this, you think this book is so poorly structured, none of it makes any sense. And it's, yeah.
I feel like we're kind of running out of time. I don't know, but
he also gets the cool horse, and that's basically, I believe that's where he ends off, right?
Well, and then he comes at the very end, and
he puts the skull of the Talanamas that he killed, like next to the desert that's not filling up with water, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and then I was going to say that he goes back and kills everyone that he said he was.
Right. Forgot about the killing spree.
Yeah, all these people. He's like, I'm going to kill you. Well, he didn't get Haboric. He wasn't able to get Haboric, who he wanted to kill.
But I mean, maybe that was ill advised. Haboric probably didn't deserve to die.
Haboric definitely didn't deserve to die. I don't know if he would have been able to kill Haboric as a priest of war. I really liked what happened there. That's like those connections. That's another cool connection back to a previous book.
Covian, right? Because Covian was a destriant of Fenner. And Fenner is now replaced by Treach. And who's the new destriant of Treach but Haboric?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a little he's essentially the new Covian, right?
Yeah, under a different god. And I don't really know like what that entails. Like they were both gods of war, right?
Yeah.
So I don't really know how different will their abilities and like purposes be. Like is it kind of like a vessel in the Cosmere where your will just be kind of bent towards that, or is it okay, I'm going to do things my way as the new god of war? Seems to be a little bit different because I didn't see anybody growing boar hair in a snout when Fëanor was in charge, but now everyone's got tiger stripes and claws and eyes.
I guess depending on the goddess that you're serving, like Felisin is totally taken over by the will of the whirlwind goddess as Shaik.
Well, that's a little different too, because she was like the new incarnation of Shaik, not just a follower, you know. So there's a little more takeover there. But
yeah, well, yeah, but I mean, Shaik, it is not the goddess herself. Shaik is like the vessel leader of, you know, whatever the whirlwind goddess is doing.
Yeah, I guess I was calling the whirlwind goddess Shaik, but I'm just not realizing.
Well, that's a little confusing because
yeah,
Shaik is sometimes referred to as, like, I feel like not everyone realizes there is a difference.
Yeah.
And I saw something that's even speculated that maybe Shaik was the original name of this Emos that we don't know the name of. That was, you know, that's killed at the very end.
And so just to clarify, so she was Onrak's like betrothed. I don't know if they're actually married, but then he wanted to be with someone else and broke this vow and this jealous rage.
So the one that he broke it for was
Kilava.
Kilava, yeah.
Not to be confused with the Pokemon Quilava.
Quilava, yeah.
Yeah,
very
Quilava, yeah. That's like the Panther lady from Memories of Ice, right?
Sister of Onos Tulan.
Yeah, Tool's sister, yeah.
But then so Shaik, we'll call her, I can't remember, I don't know if it says how she died, but she ends up like turning into this, like, gets green with jealous rage and vengeance, and somehow like merges with this broken aspect of the Warren of Shadow, right? And like, because that's what happened. Because she started going crazy, the rest of the Talana Mass like imprisoned her in Rariku, right? And then there was the broken Warren there already, plus like I feel like she was co-opting some other like energy or manifestation as well.
I think
somehow.
She was like taking energy from like her followers.
Well, that later on, but I think she was co-opting these prophecies of the 7 cities to become more than what the prophecies originally talked about. I could be wrong with that. That was my interpretation. Like she was kind of like like this power was there and I'm taking it over and becoming a new manifestation of it with my own will. I could be wrong on that, but that was my interpretation of it.
That works for me.
And the crippled god wanted to have that part of the Warren of Shadow. That's what you guys were explaining to me.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like he was just trying to get a footing. So anyway,
right, because this
is his plan.
I'm still really confused. It's funny because we talked about in our world building episode, I'd like to write a book with a similar like magic vibe and God's vibe as Malazan, but I still have like no idea how it really works in Malazan. But does the crippled god, it can give power to people because he's a god, but he doesn't have a Warren, right? At this point? Or does he?
I think he might use the Warren of Chaos.
But it's not his own. I don't know. Maybe it is. But he wanted to get part ownership of the Warren of Shadow for just to like kind of gain more power, or was there something specific about Shadow? Did it have to do with the throne that the
the crippled god seems like more of an exception to the previous pattern of, because so the magic system here they have the holds, which are like back in the day, a little bit more
Primal.
primal forces. And then they were organized into the different houses. And is there a one-to-one connection with the Warrens and the houses? And the crippled god is kind of like trying to bust in on the scene. It's not like every god has its own house, like Fenrir, or not every god has his own warren. Fenrir doesn't have his own warren separate than Treach or any of the other gods of war.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's like God's houses and warrens are all like sources of power. Does every house have a god at the head?
No, there's not like a head of the House of Light, right?
Well, would it not be Father Light?
Yeah, I think.
Oh, I guess that we haven't seen yet.
Well, they've
Father-
mentioned them so far, like Mother Dark, Father Light.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, right.
Anyways, yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to.
Yeah. Before we just like throw out a bunch of stuff, we have no idea what's going on. Yeah, keep on going.
They talk about, like, you learn about the throne that's in Shadow, which, not to be confused with the person Shadow throne, but there is a throne in the Warren of Shadow that
that's super important. At this point, we know it's super important, and two groups are going to. So Apsalar and Cutter are like wanting to defend it, as are cannot remember their names. As are Troll and Onrak. They're all headed there, right?
And you hear from Onrak and company that with that throne, you can like really abuse the power of the Emats, but no one has done it yet, right? Or I guess Shadowthrone and Cotillion never did that, but they
didn't abuse it. That's how he was able to use the Amas for the Malazan Empire originally.
Well, I thought it was because he claimed the throne, he could use them. He ordered them about, but I thought there was like something else he could do, like in a way to like abuse their power that he never actually did. Is that just me misremembering, Ryan?
I honestly don't know.
Okay. But it's connected to that mass. Definitely lets you command them. But I thought there was like even more power that could be done that he just never did. I don't know. But so anyways, that throne, is that why? Do we think that's why the crippled god wanted to get a hold of the Warren of Shadow, or just to destabilize?
Seems like something that the crippled god seems like an entity that has a lot of plans, a lot of lots of things in the fire here. And when one doesn't work, they're just going to try another one. Yeah,
it's like one doesn't work, but it causes a lot of pain and suffering, and so
more possibilities.
Cool. Yeah.
I think he wants the power from the Throne of Shadow.
Okay, that was.
I think he'd be okay with it. I don't think that's his only plan.
Yeah, but that was like part of his main plan in this book, I think. We kind of talked about Habork. Habork was way cool. It was cool to see him like not only like the change of gods, but also like realizing new abilities that come with it. We learned more about what that jade statue did, but by learning more, I was more confused about what the jade statue did.
Yeah, same.
So
was I. Yeah.
But it was cool to see how it connected. Like that moment kind of caused Treach to, not usurp, but just like take over the role of God of War, right? And I don't know.
Before we have to end, I want to talk about I feel like this is how our Malazan episodes usually go. It's like there's just so much content, we only really scratch the surface in our episodes. It's just impossible to go through
and everything. A lot of it's probably somewhat accurate, some of it's maybe entirely inaccurate, so let us know if you're a big fan of the series what we're getting wrong. Do it nicely. We're fans of the series, not experts at all. We're just trying.
Yeah. We like the world. We like the characters, but there are people who are much more knowledgeable than us. But before we end, I'm not sure how much more time we have. I want to talk about the showdown between Felisin, Shaik, and
Sure.
Deborah.
Yeah. Got to be talked about.
I mean, I had a different interpretation than you, Stephen. It seemed to me like at the end, after they slay Shaik, and Felisin kind of comes to her senses, she's like almost happy to see Tavora. Like, whereas before she was, dead set on vengeance against her, now she was kind of like, raising her hand or like moving her hand to kind of greet her sister. But Tavora thought she was going to her sword or whatever, and so she acted in self-defense.
So you thought she came to some sort of forgiveness for her?
I don't know if she fully forgave, but I definitely read that the same way, that she wasn't going to attack Tavora in that moment, and that Tavora just being completely oblivious, to what's going on, attacked her.
I mean, based off their backgrounds, I'm sure she would not have tried to attack her anyway, because she would have known she would surely lose, right?
Well, if she had Shaik's power, then I think she could have taken on Tavora easily.
Yeah, well, I mean, but she knew that she didn't have the power.
Yeah, I mean, I guess right at the end.
I guess it's hard to say what exactly her mental state was as she was like coming out of this possession.
What were you thinking? What was your interpretation, Stephen?
Oh, I mean, I think, what was I thinking? I think I probably wasn't thinking that she was as forgiving. She was more, I don't know, just trying to get her bearings, like, oh, there's my sister. I don't like my sister after all of these years of resentment, and she basically sold me out, plenty of reasons not to. I guess we didn't see enough of Felisin to make me think that she had come to this forgiveness or desire to have some recompense there. But a lot of the stuff we see in the books are not, we don't see inside the characters' heads. We more see like their actions, and we have to interpret what's going on. So It could be. I guess I would want to reread the part where she's sitting in Haborg's tent when Shaik's power had to leave her, because I think they have kind of like a personal character type conversation then. So I would want to reread that to answer this question.
Well, that was cool that he could set up that little moment to talk to the real Felisin.
How do you guys feel about the end of Felisin?
I thought it was really tragic. It made for really great drama. I assume Tavora at some point is going to realize what happened. But just the dramatic irony there of her not realizing that it's Felisin, and then not realizing that like she was only Felisin at that moment, and before like she was possessed, and like I think without the whirlwind goddess influence, it would have been easier for her to come to reason about Tavora. Maybe not completely forgive her, but not have this like vengeful desire, because I feel like you saw that in Dead House Gates when the Talon guy who was with them,
Bowden,
when he first tells her like, hey, like Tavora sent me to protect you and save you, like
Tavora's or Felisin's like, no, I don't want anything to do with her saving me.
Yeah, and like I feel like that was like a reaction of like anger at the situation, like anger at Tavora for like, you're trying to save me by making me go through like the worst experience ever, but also I think like anger at herself for hating Tavora so much. Like that idea of like, no, I want to hate Tavora, I still want this to be a thing. I don't know, I feel like I saw a little bit of a crack there that her confidence and her hate towards Tavora was shaken there. So I think without the Whirlwind Goddess's influence, it would have been easier for her to come to those terms. But I don't know if she would have fully forgiven her.
I mean, I sort of interpreted it a bit differently. I felt like maybe it was Felisin like thinking she's like very brittle, you know, she thinks this whole time that she can fend for herself. She doesn't need other people's help. Like when she's trapped on the Odoterral island, you know, she thinks she's doing all this stuff. She's saving Haboric and Bowden by like selling her body to that one guy. And really it's like they like figure out how to escape, and she's not really, I mean, she helps in her own way, but it's not super helpful, and it's not in reality very helpful. And then later on, she can't admit to herself that she like would need Tavora's help, and so she's like, I don't want my sister's help, because she wants to think that she can do it all herself. And I think she's just like really tragic character that has a tragic ending, because like at the end of the book, she's killed by her sister, who I think genuinely cares for her and loves her, but just doesn't know who she is.
It's a little surprising to me that the plot didn't take it to the point where Tavora realized who Felisin was. I feel like that would have really kind of like locked in things into a tighter arc and had a pretty big payoff for the reader.
I don't know. Like, I feel like that was, it would have been like more epic than it's like sister versus sister, and like you're kind of building towards that. But I think
but after she kills her.
Oh, finding out after.
Yeah.
I think she's gonna find out at some point.
It's almost more tragic though that Felisin dies by her sister in like obscurity. Her sister doesn't even know.
Yeah, there's that element to it.
And
I mean, I'm sure it's intentional, and there's that is probably, like you say, Ryan, that adds to it, but it's not as like Shakespearean tragic.
I feel like it is, because it's like right before the spies could get back and let her know, you know.
Well, okay, in that element,
and like the dramatic irony, but you think there'd be more of a like she would know at the end. I think it's like it makes it stronger, the fact that she doesn't. I agree with Ryan, but I do think, at least in this moment, I do think at some point she's going to realize what happened. I could be wrong. I don't even know. Like maybe she doesn't show up ever again in this series, but I don't understand how I saw a lot of hate for Felisin when I was reading Dead House Gates, and I didn't really get it then. I could kind of understand why like they thought she was annoying, but now seeing her full arc, like I don't know why how could you not have anything but pity for her? I don't know.
I mean, I think reading through Dead House Gates, she is, like you said, she's very obnoxious, and she thinks that she's doing everything herself. And
I wouldn't say obnoxious, like she's just broken, trying to survive, you know, like she's just in survival mode the whole time.
I mean, maybe not like obnoxious, but she's like definitely abrasive to like everybody around her who are like trying to help her, and she's just like, you know,
other characters that are easier to just like, okay, I see this person's trying to help them, and like she's not accepting their help, like that can be frustrating as a reader.
Right, but at the same time, there is a big disconnect in communication. Like if Bowden and Haboric had communicated with her sooner, like if they had trusted her enough to like communicate their plans from the beginning, then, you know, so much of that could have been avoided.
Yeah, true.
I don't know that Felisin was necessarily deserving of the trust in the beginning.
I don't feel like she was like rude or abrasive until after, like, I could be misremembering it, but it didn't seem like she was that way until after she'd gone through a lot.
I mean, there are a lot of circumstances as well that made it hard for that like open line of communication, because if too much information had been shared and things had gone south, like I think there were reasons why it wasn't just like, it wasn't Wheel of Time level of miscommunication where
Well, I'm just like, they obviously knew, like they could tell, like they should have been able to tell. I don't know. Maybe I need to reread that. It seems like they should have been able to tell what she was doing was to try to like make the best out of the situation. And if they would be like, hey, like you don't need to do this. We have a plan to get us out of here. Like you don't, even if they didn't realize she was doing it to try to help them as well, just for herself, like you don't need to do this. Like things are going to work out. I don't know.
All right, to close, I have one moment that I really liked and one thing that I didn't like as much. So my favorite part of the book, for whatever reason, was this one chapter where they do the scorpion fight. And then after they do the scorpion fight, they go off and they fight. They start, like, it's like the first engagement of the actual war. I just loved the like small story of the scorpion fight and the trickery involved. And then, and from that like small, intimate story to the larger, and it kind of paralleled the way that the fight unfolded. I really enjoyed that. I know it was kind of in the midst of this like slow build towards the war, towards the eventual big battle, which did kind of drag a bit, but I thought that was really well done. Any comments on that?
I really liked it. It was cool. I was trying to think like I knew there was some trickery about to happen, like you could tell there was there was some hidden plan, but I was like trying to figure out what it was, but that was good.
The thing that I didn't like as much was just the title, because I was expecting the House of Chains to be more involved, because I thought it was really cool in Memories of Ice, like, oh, there's this, well, first realizing that the crippled god was a big thing and he was going to try to form his own house, and Perrin saying like, well, I'm not sure if I should legitimize it or not, because if I do, then he'll be forced to hold to the rules. Like all of this stuff going into this big conflict, which I thought would be picking up more steam. So going to this one's like, okay, this one's called the House of Chains. There's going to be some big payoff for this. And I realized that, it was really an effort of the crippled god to form the House of Chains so that didn't really work out the way that he wanted it to. But I was just expecting more with that title. I was expecting more progress towards the actual House of Chains, rather than a big misstep for the House of Chains.
I wonder how big of a misstep it was, though. I mean,
he definitely had plans that he wanted to have happen that didn't work out.
Yeah, like Bidethal, I feel like that was the biggest misstep. I still think the Karsa thing is like good enough.
Yeah, sure. TBD.
Although I'd be interested to see how much of Karsa like ends up playing into the crippled god's hands or not.
Karsa is definitely, Karsa is probably the best part of this book. The establishment of his character. We talked the most about him. He seemed to interest all of us the most. I think he's the best part of the book.
I really liked him. I like what happened with Haboric. I loved the chapter with Lorik where you finally get his POV and you go into, I don't remember, he goes into another realm too. People are always just popping in and out of other planes of existence. And then this huge dragon comes. He's like, oh, hey, Dad. Like, okay. I
don't even know.
What was the dragon's
name?
name?
It that much. It's Osric.
Okay, I'm gonna have to go. I took a pause of Midnight Tides to read the Alloy of Law stuff to get caught up for our second book of that one.
Mm-hmm.
I need to go and see if Osric has been mentioned in that book.
He's been mentioned enough times where I had seen the name pop up, and I searched it, and I knew that was risky, but I was prepared to take the risk because I just wanted to know what this was, and I don't think I had anything spoiled. Because the good thing about the Malazan wiki is it does separate out it separates by book. So like, okay, I can't read any further. I'm risking spoilers.
Yeah, it's like, this is what happens with this character in this book.
Yeah, and the summary is worded in a way that doesn't reveal like alive or dead, or they just do the brief summary and then they say, okay, here's what happens in each book. That's a great way to do your wiki, by the way.
But I loved that scene, and then they see the humongous Hounds of Shadow, which did they have a name? I can't remember if they did.
Demer.
Yes, they do have names.
Demo dogs.
Demogorgon, Demidogs. Yeah, Stranger
Instead
Things.
Instead of Hounds of Shadow, these are like the Wargs of Shadow. They're huge. That was cool. And then I could be misremembering this again, but he befriends another like demon creature, right? Like one of the ape-like ones, or was that Kalam?
That's Kalam.
No. Lorik does. Lorik gets a familiar.
Because Kalam befriended one in Deadhouse Gates.
An Aptorian.
An Aptorian, yeah,
Mhm.
Apt. And then this one was more of a monkey-looking one, right?
A Bokarala.
No,
It was for sure some kind of demon thing. I know yeah. I
because
don't
it was
remember what the description was, but it's definitely a
because
demon.
he helps a Boric at times, and he's like got this weird like. He's like, "Are we friends, or am I going to eat you?" or something like that to Boric. And he's like, "Oh, okay, we're friends," or something. Like it was kind of comedic relief.
No, yeah.
I'd say I was surprised that like I feel like the content level of this one really shot up, and not like, again, not super explicit, but like hearing about Felisin like prostituting herself was hard in Deadhouse Gates, and then in this one with like Bidithal and his horrible person. Yeah, it just got a lot heavier than I think the earlier books, but I think it was done well, and I don't know. Yeah,
I agree. That was definitely hard to read. Yeah. Ryan, any closing remarks on House of Chains for you?
How do we do on our assessments?
How did it? So you've read the whole series. Do you remember how this one stacks up for you?
I don't remember exactly. I mean, I feel like my favorites are probably like Toll the Hounds and Memories of Ice. Those are just have a lot of epic moments in them. I do remember liking this one quite a bit just because of the introduction of Karsa, and
He's so cool.
He's really cool, and he's like trying to like make his own way in the world, and throw off the chains, I guess, that he's been bound with. And
nice.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe it is a more apt title than we
really had to think about that one. I liked the part where he slays the Hounds of Darkness.
Oh, that's what they are. They're Hounds of Darkness.
They are, yeah.
Instead of Hounds of Shadow.
They're called Daragoth, I think they are. I mean, that I think shows you just how strong Karsa is getting to be, and he's a cool character. I think I remember really liking the book. I don't know that I remember it well enough that I could give it like a definitive score out of 10, but I liked it.
So it sounds like this is kind of mid-tier for you.
Yeah, I'd probably say it's mid-tier, but then when I try and think of like what's lower tier for me in this series, I couldn't really tell you.
I liked it better than Deadhouse Gates, honestly. Maybe I'd like Deadhouse Gates more if I reread it with like the context I have now.
Yeah.
But I felt like Deadhouse Gates, I was like confused and kind of like just like not sure what was happening for the majority of the book until there's a really cool chain of dogs moment. Whereas this one I felt like had a better pacing for me.
Can I just say a correction to my earlier comment when I was talking about this being Stephen Erickson's book that he was supposed to write earlier but lost the manuscript? That was actually Memories of Ice. He was going to, that was going to be the second book, not Deadhouse Gates, and he did lose.
I think we talked about this in our Memories.
I think we did.
Yeah.
I think we did. It's just embarrassing that we didn't remember what we talked about. So he'd written about 300 pages of the new book, and they were lost to a computer failure. So at that point, he was, I think, just like, I'm going to move on, write Dead House Gates instead of Memories of Ice. And so I think, yeah, so I was wrong in the beginning.
That makes sense for why kind of the series follows the structure it does so far. Like if you're planning on writing this continuous story and then you got a bump in the road, and then so you pivot and do like, you know, the different story, and then you're kind of like, well, now I'm not beholden to any any sort of order that way.
Yeah. The computer failure is what we have to owe to this to the complexity of the series.
Man, that would kill me. I wonder if to this day he's like, there, like if there's parts of that original manuscript, he's like, man, I wish I still had that because I knew there was like a better part in there than what I was able to rewrite.
Yeah,
that would kill me.
All right, so on to Midnight Tides. We'll see when we get to that. What do we want to try to committing to a date actually helped me. I didn't actually finish House of Chains by the date that I committed to, but I felt bad that I missed it, so I read faster. I was still about a month past the commit date. So
end of July. Yeah. I'm halfway through it.
Man, that's coming up fast. It's mid-June right now. I haven't even started. I feel like end of July is not realistic for me if I'm going to listen, and if I'm going to read and not listen.
So what would be realistic for you, Stephen?
Let's say mid-July.
Oh, mid-July instead of end of July.
Yeah. Give me two more weeks.
Wait.
I don't think you realize what you just said.
You mean middle of August?
Oh, middle of August. They're different months. Okay.
Cool. Yeah,
mid-August. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Wow, your negotiation's really good.
Dang, that puts me in a bit of a pickle. I don't know if I should just finish it while I'm halfway through it or put it on pause to finish around the same time. We'll see.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You
stay tuned and witness.
All right. We got to end on that. That was good. Jake.